Even now, as the wind drifts softly across endless dunes, there are places beneath the sand where time seems to hesitate, as though unsure whether it should continue moving forward or remain still forever. Long after the last footsteps vanished, long after the final fire turned to ash, something remains buried beneath the shifting surface. A city once alive with voices, ritual, and purpose. Tonight, you are about to wander through that forgotten place, not as an explorer racing against time, nor as a scholar seeking proof, but as a quiet witness, moving slowly, gently, with no urgency at all. The lost city does not need to be uncovered. It remembers itself, and if you listen carefully, it will tell its story in whispers rather than words. Perhaps you are listening late at night, the room dim, the world finally quiet. Or maybe the sun has just begun to rise where you are, light filtering through a window as you prepare to rest. You might be in a city apartment, surrounded by distant hums and fading traffic, or somewhere rural, where only insects and wind accompany you. Wherever you are, whether it is midnight, early morning, or a calm afternoon, this story will move at your pace. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to do. Let the desert carry you. Long before maps were drawn with certainty, before borders hardened into lines, travelers spoke of a place that appeared only when the wind changed direction. A city said to rise from the sand at dawn and vanish by dusk. Some believed it was a mirage, born from heat and exhaustion. Others claimed it was cursed, hidden deliberately by forces older than language. But the elders of the caravan routes told a quieter version. They said the city was real. They said it had streets. They said it had gardens. And they said it fell not to war, but to forgetting. The desert wind, warm and patient, became its keeper. In those distant centuries, the land was not always dry. There were seasons when shallow rivers traced silver lines through the valleys, and clusters of green gathered where water lingered. It was there, at the meeting point of wind, stone, and sky, that the city was founded. No one remembers its true name. What survives are fragments, symbols carved into weathered stone, patterns repeated in broken pottery, and stories that echo faintly in later civilizations, stripped of their original meaning. The city's people did not build tall monuments meant to challenge the heavens. Instead, they built low, harmonious structures that followed the curves of the land, shaped by wind rather than resisting it. Their architects listened to the desert. Homes were aligned with the prevailing breeze, allowing air to flow naturally through shaded corridors. Courtyards were sunken slightly below ground level, preserving coolness even in the height of summer. At night, rooftops absorbed the cold of the sky, releasing it slowly as people slept beneath woven canopies. Life moved slowly here. Time was not measured in hours, but in shadows, in the way light crept across stone, in the length of a breath taken while watching clouds dissolve into nothingness. At the heart of the city stood a circular structure, open to the sky. There were no walls high enough to enclose it, no doors to bar entry. It was not a temple in the traditional sense, but something quieter, a place of listening. The people believed the desert spoke, not in commands or prophecies, but in patterns, wind against stone, sand against skin, silence against thought. Children were brought there at dawn to sit without instruction. Elders gathered at dusk, not to debate, but to observe. Over generations, they learned to recognize subtle changes, the meaning carried by a sudden stillness or by wind that arrived too early in the season. To outsiders, this knowledge seemed like superstition. To the city, it was survival. Caravans occasionally passed nearby, their bells echoing faintly across the dunes. Some traders stopped, exchanging salt, copper, and dyed cloth for water and rest. Others avoided the place entirely, uneasy with how quietly the city existed, as if it did not wish to be noticed. And perhaps it did not. For centuries, the city endured. It did not expand aggressively. It did not conquer. It did not leave behind grand inscriptions announcing its achievements. Its people believed permanence was an illusion, and that the desert rewarded those who adapted rather than dominated. Then, slowly, the wind began to change. It was subtle at first, a shift in seasonal patterns, wells that needed to be dug deeper, gardens that required more care. The elders noticed, of course. They always did. But there was no panic. Change was expected. The desert had always been in motion. What they did not expect was how quiet the end would be. There was no final battle, no sudden catastrophe, no single moment that marked the city's fall. Families began leaving in small groups, following rumors of more reliable water sources elsewhere. Others stayed, convinced the balance would return. Over time, laughter faded from the courtyards. Footsteps became fewer. Doors were closed and never reopened. Eventually, only a handful remained. When the last fires were extinguished, the desert moved in without resistance. Sand drifted through open passageways, settling gently over floors worn smooth by generations. Roofs collapsed not in violence but in surrender. The circular listening place filled slowly, grain by grain, until the sky itself disappeared from view. And then the city slept. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell beyond the horizon. New languages replaced old ones. The memory of the city transformed into legend, then rumor, then silence. Wind erased edges. Heat softened stone. What had once been shaped by human hands returned to the language of nature. Yet even now, beneath the dunes, the city waits, not to be found, not to be claimed, but to be remembered. As you continue listening, allow your breathing to slow. Imagine the wind passing over the desert at night, cool and steady. Imagine stars overhead, unchanged by time. The city does not demand your attention. It only invites your presence. And in that presence, its story continues to unfold, slowly, quietly, exactly as it always has. The wind moves differently at night. Without the heat of the sun pressing down on the land, it becomes gentler, more deliberate, as though it is no longer rushing to escape the day. In the darkness, the desert exhales. Sand settles. Shadows soften. And beneath layers of time, the lost city seems to listen once more. Long after its people were gone, the city continued to exist in ways that are difficult to measure. Stone remembers pressure, earth remembers weight, and places shaped by human intention often retain a quiet echo of those who once lived there. Travelers who camped nearby, unaware of what lay beneath their feet, sometimes spoke of strange dreams. Dreams of walking along curved streets, of cool air flowing through narrow passages, of voices speaking without sound. They woke unsettled, yet calm. These dreams were never urgent. They did not warn or instruct. They simply observed. In the deepest layers of the buried city, rooms remained intact long after roofs collapsed above them. Storage chambers carved directly into bedrock preserved fragments of daily life, clay vessels smoothed by use, simple tools shaped for endurance rather than beauty, woven fibers reduced to faint impressions in hardened soil. Nothing extravagant, nothing wasteful. This was a city that understood limits. Water, always scarce, had been managed with quiet precision. Channels guided rare rainfall into underground cisterns lined with stone and resin. Every drop was accounted for, every loss noticed. Children learned early how to move through the city without disturbing dust unnecessarily, how to cover vessels properly, how to listen for changes in the wind that might signal an approaching storm. Storms were both feared and welcomed. When rain came, it transformed the land briefly, dramatically. Dry channels filled with rushing water. The scent of wet earth spread across the plains. For a short time, the desert revealed a softer face. The city's people gathered during these moments, not in celebration, but in gratitude. They believed excess emotion disrupted balance. Instead, they observed quietly, allowing the moment to pass as all things eventually did. Their beliefs were not written down. They existed in gestures, habits, and shared understanding. Knowledge passed through presence rather than instruction. Elders did not lecture. They demonstrated, a hand placed on stone, a pause before speaking, a willingness to wait. This way of living did not leave behind grand texts for historians to analyze. It left patterns, subtle alignments of buildings, repeated proportions, consistent orientation toward certain stars that rose reliably in the night sky. The people watched the heavens, but not to predict fate. They watched to remain oriented. Certain stars were associated with seasons, not gods. When one cluster appeared at dusk, it signaled time to reinforce wells. Another rising before dawn marked the period when winds would grow stronger, carrying sand from distant regions. These observations were practical, grounded, and free from mythologizing. And yet mystery remained. At the edge of the city, partially separated from residential areas, stood a series of low chambers carved into a rocky outcrop. Their purpose was never fully clear. No signs of habitation were found there. No tools, no storage vessels, only smooth stone floors and walls marked with shallow grooves, repeated in similar patterns across each chamber. Some believe these were places of sound. When wind passed through the openings above, it created low, resonant tones that shifted with direction and intensity. Standing within these chambers, one could feel vibrations more than hear them, a deep hum that seemed to pass through the body rather than the ears. It is possible these spaces were used for meditation or rest or healing, or perhaps they served no function at all beyond allowing people to experience stillness in a different way. In a city so attuned to its environment, even silence had structure. As centuries turned, sand sealed these chambers carefully, preserving them more completely than exposed structures. They became pockets of time, waiting without expectation. Far above, life continued. Nomadic groups crossed the region, unaware of the city beneath them. Their stories changed with each generation. What began as a whispered warning about a place where the wind behaved strangely eventually softened into a vague sense of unease, then disappeared entirely. Maps erased the area with blank space. Later civilizations rose far from this desert, building monuments meant to last forever. They carved their names into stone, declared dominion over land and sky, and believed memory could be controlled through permanence. But even those monuments would crumble. The lost city never claimed immortality. It accepted impermanence as a condition of existence, and perhaps because of that, it endured in a different way. In recent times, recent only by human standards, satellites passed overhead, scanning the desert with unblinking precision. Variations in temperature revealed faint outlines beneath the sand, curves where straight lines were expected, patterns inconsistent with natural formations. The city was detected, though not yet disturbed. Researchers debated, funding was discussed, logistics planned, yet something delayed the process. Political shifts, environmental concerns, competing priorities. The desert, patient as always, continued its quiet guardianship, and so the city remains mostly untouched. You may imagine it now as it exists beneath the surface, preserved in darkness, neither alive nor gone. A place where footsteps once echoed softly, where wind was invited rather than resisted, where people lived without believing they needed to be remembered. As you rest, let the image settle gently. The desert at night, the slow movement of air, the sense of something ancient and calm beneath everything you know. There is no revelation waiting, no secret to uncover, only the steady presence of a place that understood time differently. And in that understanding, it still waits, quietly, as the wind moves on. The desert does not mind being forgotten. It has watched countless paths form and fade buried, watched names spoken with certainty dissolve into silence. To the desert, memory is not something to be preserved, but something that moves, like sand carried from one place to another, never truly lost, only changed. Beneath the surface, the lost city rests in this same understanding. As night deepens, the temperature drops, and the sand above contracts almost imperceptibly. In these moments, tiny spaces open between grains, allowing air to pass through. It is during these hours that the buried chambers breathe most freely, exchanging the warmth of the day for the coolness of the dark. If one could descend gently without breaking stone or disturbing dust, one would find the city arranged as it always was. Streets curve rather than intersect sharply. Angles soften into arcs. Even corners were designed to guide movement rather than stop it. Walking there feels less like navigating and more like flowing. The central open space, the place of listening, lies completely covered now, yet its shape remains intact. The roof never existed, so nothing collapsed. Instead, sand filled it slowly, evenly, preserving the circle with remarkable precision. The walls, built low and wide, absorbed pressure without cracking. They were made to endure weight, not height. Around this central place, homes form rings, each one positioned with subtle intention. Families lived close enough to share warmth and resources, yet far enough apart to maintain quiet. Privacy was not enforced through barriers, but through mutual respect. Inside the homes, life was simple and deliberate. Sleeping spaces were oriented away from the rising sun, allowing rest to continue into the morning. Cooking areas faced openings that directed smoke upward and outward, never lingering. Storage was minimal. Excess was considered a burden, something that demanded attention and care, distracting from awareness. Children grew up learning to notice small changes. A new sound in the wind, a faint vibration beneath their feet, the way animals moved when weather was about to shift. This sensitivity was not mystical, it was practical. Those who noticed early survived longer. Elders were valued not for authority, but for perspective. They remembered longer cycles, years when water was scarce, and years when it was abundant. They taught patience during hardship and restraint during comfort. The greatest failure, they believed, was to mistake temporary conditions for permanent truth. Perhaps this is why the city did not panic when decline began. When water grew harder to access, they adapted. When adaptation was no longer enough, they accepted movement. Leaving was not seen as defeat, it was seen as continuation. The land changes, so do people. Those who departed carried little with them. Tools, yes. Knowledge, certainly. But not the city itself. It belonged where it was. Trying to recreate it elsewhere would have been misunderstanding its purpose. And so it was left behind intact. Time passed in layers, sand accumulated in seasons, not storms. Each year added only a thin veil, barely noticeable. Plants briefly took root during rare wet periods, their remains enriching the soil before vanishing again. Animals burrowed and moved on, never reaching the deeper structures. The city remained just out of reach. When early explorers crossed nearby regions centuries later, their journals mentioned unusual wind patterns, areas where sound behaved strangely, where voices carried farther than expected or vanished entirely. They noted these observations with curiosity, then moved on, driven by goals that demanded speed. No one stayed long enough to listen. In modern times, the idea of uncovering the city raises difficult questions. Should it be exposed to light again? Should its stones be catalogued, its layout mapped, its contents displayed? Or should it remain where it is, preserved by darkness and pressure, unchanged by interpretation? There is no clear answer. Some places lose something essential when they are observed too closely. Their meaning exists not in what they reveal, but in what they withhold. The lost city was never meant to instruct future generations. It was meant to exist fully in its own time, then release itself. And yet it continues to influence. Architects studying passive cooling systems unknowingly echo its designs. Urban planners seeking harmony with environment rediscover principles it practiced instinctively. Philosophers speaking of impermanence touch ideas its people lived without naming. The city does not need recognition to matter. As you listen now, perhaps your thoughts are slowing. The rhythm of the words becomes less important than the space between them. This is how the city would prefer it, not as a story to be followed, but as an atmosphere to rest within. Imagine walking there just before dusk. The light is low, warm, stretching shadows across stone. The air moves gently, carrying the scent of earth and distance. There is no rush to return home, no obligation waiting, only the awareness of being present, exactly where you are. In this place, time does not press forward. It widens, and as the night settles fully over the desert, the city remains, not awake, not asleep, but held in a quiet state between, safe beneath the sand, unconcerned with discovery. The wind passes over it once more, smoothing the surface, erasing the last signs of passage, and everything continues, as it always has. As the hours pass, the desert grows cooler, and the sky above becomes a vast, silent expanse. Stars appear without announcement, steady and distant, indifferent to what lies beneath them. They are the same stars the people of the lost city once observed, not for prophecy, but for orientation. Markers in a sky that reminded them where they were in the greater pattern of things. Below, the city remains unchanged. There are moments, rare and subtle, when the earth shifts slightly, not enough to be felt on the surface, but enough to send a slow vibration through buried stone. These movements are not threats. They are reminders that the land is alive in its own way, constantly adjusting, redistributing weight, maintaining balance. The structures of the city respond as they were designed to. Pressure travels along curved walls and settles into the ground. Nothing resists, nothing fractures. This acceptance of force is perhaps the city's greatest lesson, though it never intended to teach one. In the deepest chambers, where sound once gathered and softened, silence is complete. Not the absence of noise, but a fullness, a silence that feels inhabited. If someone were there now, breathing slowly, they might sense a gentle resonance, like the echo of a long-held note fading into rest. These spaces do not demand interpretation. They simply are. Far away, modern life continues at its relentless pace. Lights remain on through the night. Screens glow. Information moves faster than thought. Yet occasionally someone pauses, listening to a story like this one, and feels something shift, a slowing, a loosening of urgency. This, too, is a kind of remembering. The people of the lost city did not separate rest from awareness. Sleep was not an escape from life, but part of it. Dreams were not analyzed or controlled. They were allowed to pass through like weather, meaningful only in how they left the mind afterward. At night, families slept close to the ground, feeling the earth's steady presence beneath them. There was comfort in that contact, a reminder that they were supported, held, never truly alone. Even now, beneath the sand, the city offers that same quiet reassurance. Nothing is required of you as you listen. There is nothing to solve, nothing to carry forward. You may notice your breathing deepen, your muscles soften, your thoughts drift without direction. This is not distraction. It is arrival. The same arrival the city invited in those who lived there, a gentle return to simplicity. Imagine the desert just before dawn. The air is at its coolest. The sky lightens slowly, almost imperceptibly. For a brief time, everything is evenly lit. No harsh shadows, no glare. In that balance, the world feels suspended. Above the buried city, the first breeze of morning passes, rearranging the sand's surface. Patterns form and vanish within moments. Nothing insists on permanence. And below, the city remains exactly as it is meant to be. Its story does not end. It does not begin again. It simply continues, outside of time as we measure it. As your awareness fades gently, let the image dissolve. The desert, the wind, the quiet persistence of stone and space. There is no need to follow further. Everything is at rest now. The silence that follows is not empty. It is layered, like the desert itself, composed of countless small pauses resting gently against one another. In this stillness, even the idea of movement becomes soft, distant, almost unnecessary. If the city could be said to dream, this would be its dreamless state, a deep, steady rest without images or thoughts. Stone cools completely now, releasing the last warmth of the previous day back into the earth. Sand settles into a temporary arrangement, knowing it will change again soon. Nothing resists the moment. Long ago, the people of the city believed that true balance could only be found by releasing the need to mark time too precisely. They did not count years. They did not celebrate anniversaries of founding or departure. Life was measured instead by cycles of wind, of rain, of rest. When a child was born, there was no recorded date. The event itself was enough. When someone died, there was no monument erected to preserve their name. They were returned to the land quietly, with the understanding that presence mattered more than memory. This way of living left no lineage to trace, no kings to list, no conflicts to catalog. It left behind something far more difficult to preserve, a feeling. That feeling still lingers. It is felt in the way the desert seems to widen rather than close in the way sound carries differently at night, in the sense that even vast emptiness can feel full, supportive, calm. You may notice now that the story has slowed even further. Words arrive gently, then drift away. This is intentional. The city never hurried, and neither should you. Imagine lying on warm stone beneath an open sky, just as the city's people once did. The stars above are countless, yet none demand attention. The air moves softly across your skin. The ground beneath you is steady and patient. There is no future to plan, no past to revisit, only this moment. The desert does not ask to be understood, it only asks to be allowed to exist as it is. And the lost city, resting beneath its care, accepts this completely. Soon, the wind will rise again. It always does. It will reshape the surface, erase faint traces, and continue its endless, gentle work. But for now, everything is quiet. As your thoughts grow fewer and lighter, allow them to fade without holding on. Let the image of the city dissolve into darkness. Let the desert become simply a sensation, spacious, calm, unchanging. Nothing else is needed. The city rests, the wind moves on, and you can rest too. The night stretches on without urgency. Somewhere far beyond the desert, clocks continue to mark seconds, minutes, hours. But here, time loosens its grip. It becomes less a sequence and more a feeling, a gentle expansion, like breath moving slowly in and out. Above the buried city, the sky deepens to its darkest shade. Stars appear sharper now, no longer competing with fading light. They seem closer somehow, as though the vast distance between earth and sky has softened. This was the hour the city's people favored most, the space between complete darkness and the first hint of dawn. It was during these hours that listening mattered most, not listening for danger, not listening for instruction, but listening for alignment. The wind at this time carried subtle variations, not loud enough to demand attention, but distinct enough to be felt by those attuned to it. A slightly cooler current from the north, a warmer breath rising from stone still holding the day's heat. These movements told quiet stories about what was shifting beyond the horizon. The people did not name these patterns, they experienced them. Now, centuries later, those same currents pass over the sand. They trace the outlines of buried walls, follow the gentle curves of forgotten streets, and slip into chambers that have not known human presence for generations. Yet nothing feels abandoned. Stone does not miss voices. Earth does not mourn footsteps. The city has not been waiting for a return. It has been resting in the deepest layers where sand has compacted into something almost solid. The temperature remains constant, neither hot nor cold, neither day nor night. This steady environment has preserved more than structure. It has preserved intention. You might imagine walking there now, not physically, but in the way one drifts through a memory that was never truly theirs. Your steps make no sound. The air does not resist you. Walls curve gently around your path, guiding rather than directing. There are no signs, no symbols demanding interpretation, no warnings, only space. In one low chamber, partially collapsed but still recognizable, faint markings cover a section of wall. They are not writing, they are not images. They are repetitions, shallow grooves pressed into stone by hands moving slowly, deliberately. No two are exactly the same. Perhaps they were made during moments of reflection, or while waiting, or while listening to others speak. Their meaning was never fixed. It existed only in the act itself. Touch meeting stone, presence meeting time. As you pass through this imagined space, the markings do not ask you to understand them. They ask only that you notice their rhythm, the spacing, the patience required to make them. This patience shaped everything in the city. Meals were unhurried. Conversations unfolded with long pauses. Decisions were rarely immediate. Silence was not something to be filled, but something to be respected. Even conflict, when it arose, was handled without urgency. Disagreements were acknowledged, then left to rest. Often, by the time they were revisited, they had softened or dissolved on their own. Urgency was considered a form of imbalance. The desert reinforced this belief daily. Those who rushed across it exhausted themselves. Those who fought it wasted energy. Only those who moved with it endured. As the night continues, the wind shifts slightly. A fine layer of sand slides across the surface above the city, smoothing out small irregularities. From above, nothing suggests what lies beneath. The landscape appears untouched, unchanged, endless. This anonymity is not accidental. The city did not wish to be a destination. It wished to be a moment fully lived, then released. You may feel now that the words themselves are becoming less distinct, more like texture than information. This is intentional. The story is no longer guiding you forward. It is settling around you, like the desert settling around the city. Thoughts may arise, fragments of your own life, images unrelated to this place. Let them pass. The city would not hold them. It would allow them to move on, carried by the same wind that shapes everything else. There is nothing left to uncover, nothing hidden that must be revealed. Only the quiet continuity of existence. Somewhere far beneath the surface, the city remains perfectly still. It does not dream of return. It does not fear erosion. It does not anticipate discovery. It simply is. And as your awareness drifts further, the distinction between listener and landscape softens. You are no longer observing the desert, you are resting within it, supported, unjudged, unhurried. The wind moves, the sand settles, the night holds, everything else can wait. The desert remains unchanged in its quiet patience. As the night advances, the air grows even more still, as if the land itself has chosen to pause. In this pause, everything feels gently suspended, not frozen, but resting between movements. The wind does not disappear. It simply learns how to move without being noticed. Beneath the sand, the city accepts this stillness without question. There was never a belief among its people that stillness meant emptiness. Quite the opposite. Stillness was where meaning gathered. It was where clarity emerged, not through effort, but through absence. When nothing demanded attention, awareness widened naturally. This understanding shaped even the smallest details of daily life. Water vessels were designed to pour slowly, preventing waste and encouraging patience. Paths were curved so no one could rush directly from one place to another. Even seating areas were shaped to encourage relaxed postures, bodies leaning back rather than forward, gazes lifting naturally toward open sky. The city was a quiet teacher, though it never announced lessons. In the present moment, as you listen, that same teaching remains embedded in its form. Even unseen, it continues to influence the space above it. Sound travels differently here. Wind behaves with subtle complexity. The land remembers what it once held. If you could descend again into the buried streets, you might notice how evenly the sand has filled the spaces, not in chaos, but in balance. Doorways remain outlined. Thresholds are still discernible. The city's logic has not been erased, only softened. There is a particular comfort in knowing that something can exist without needing to be accessed. Modern thinking often assumes value comes from exposure, from discovery, from explanation. But the lost city contradicts this idea gently, without argument. Its value lies in its wholeness, not in its visibility. It does not require witnesses. As the hours stretch on, the desert cools further. On the surface, small animals emerge briefly, leaving delicate trails that will vanish by morning. Their movements do not disturb what lies beneath. Life continues lightly, respectfully. The city was built with this same understanding, that existence does not require domination. Its people never sought to reshape the desert entirely. They shaped themselves instead. They learned when to act and when to wait, when to build and when to step back, when to speak and when to listen. Listening was considered the highest form of intelligence. Not listening for advantage, but listening for alignment. Listening to what already existed before decisions were made. Listening to the land, to each other, to the subtle discomfort that signaled imbalance. Perhaps this is why the city did not collapse suddenly. There was no moment of panic, no desperate clinging, only a gradual loosening of attachment as circumstances changed. Leaving was not abandonment. Staying was not stubbornness. Each choice was made quietly, respectfully. Now, long removed from those decisions, the city rests in neutrality. It does not judge what followed. It does not compare past and present. Such concepts hold no weight here. As you continue resting, your breathing may have slowed without effort. Muscles soften naturally when no instruction is given. The mind, relieved of urgency, begins to drift, not toward sleep immediately, but toward ease. This ease is the city's final gift. Imagine again the central open space, the place of listening, now completely filled with sand. The circle remains intact, though unseen. Within that circle, everything feels evenly distributed. No side heavier than another, no direction privileged. Balance does not require awareness to exist. Above this space, the sky begins its slow transformation. Though still dark, there is the faintest suggestion of change. Not light yet, but possibility. The city does not respond to this shift. It does not prepare. It does not anticipate. It remains. This constancy is not resistance. It is trust. Trust that cycles will continue. Trust that nothing essential has been lost. Trust that existence does not require validation. As your thoughts grow fewer, you may notice that the story itself feels less like something you are following and more like something you are floating within. This is how it is meant to be now. The narrative loosens, structure dissolves gently. The desert stretches endlessly. The city sleeps without dreaming. The wind continues its quiet work. And you are free to rest, carried by the same calm that has held this place for centuries. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more will happen. Everything is already where it belongs. The quiet deepens further, as if the night itself has learned how to listen. There is a point somewhere between waking and sleep when thoughts lose their edges. They no longer arrive fully formed. Instead, they drift in fragments, soft impressions that rise and fade without demanding attention. This is the same state the city once encouraged, not through instruction but through design, rhythm, and restraint. The desert understands this state well. It offers no sudden changes, no sharp contrasts, only gradual transitions that allow the mind to follow without effort. Heat becomes cool, Sound becomes silence. Motion becomes stillness. Nothing is forced. Everything is invited. Beneath the sand, the city exists in this invitation endlessly. Its stones no longer remember hands individually, but they remember intention. They remember care. They remember being placed rather than imposed. This memory does not think or speak, yet it remains embedded in form and proportion. If you were to wander again through its buried corridors, you might feel a sense of familiarity without recognition, a comfort without explanation. The spaces do not surprise you. They feel as though they were always meant to be this way. Walls curve gently inward, creating a sense of enclosure without confinement. Ceilings remain low, encouraging calm rather than grandeur. Every structure supports the body's natural tendency to rest. Even now, the city does not ask for attention. It does not call to be seen. It allows itself to remain unnoticed, secure in its completeness. Above, the desert breathes slowly. The wind, now barely perceptible, carries fine grains of sand that settle into new arrangements. These patterns will last only until the next movement, and then they will change again. No pattern is privileged. No shape is preserved beyond its moment. This acceptance shaped the people who lived here. They did not believe in controlling outcomes. They believed in responding appropriately. When conditions were favorable, they acted. When they were not, they waited. Waiting was not seen as inactivity, but as participation in a larger rhythm. In modern life, waiting is often misunderstood. It is filled with tension, expectation, impatience. But in the city, waiting was spacious. It allowed awareness to expand. It allowed unnecessary effort to fall away. That same spaciousness surrounds you now. There is nothing ahead that needs preparation, nothing behind that requires reflection. The present moment is wide enough to hold everything gently. The city's people often gathered at night simply to sit together in silence. No agenda, no discussion, just shared presence. They understood that not all connection required words. Perhaps you can sense that now, a quiet connection not just to the story, but to the state it creates. A feeling of being accompanied without intrusion. The desert offers this companionship generously. As the night nears its deepest point, the air becomes exceptionally clear. Sounds, if they occur at all, travel farther, thinner. A distant movement might be heard and then forgotten immediately. Nothing lingers unnecessarily. This clarity was cherished. In such moments, the people believed the world revealed itself most honestly, not through events, but through absence of distraction. When nothing competed for attention, truth felt simple. The city embodied this simplicity in every aspect of its existence. No excess decoration, no monumental statements, no attempt to impress, just balance. Now, that balance holds you as well. Your body rests where it is. The surface beneath you supports without question. Gravity does its work quietly. Breath moves in and out without effort. The story no longer needs to move forward. It has reached the same place the city reached long ago. A state of completion without conclusion. The desert remains. The city rests. The wind continues its gentle, endless work. And you are free to drift, unhurried, into rest, knowing that nothing important is being missed. Everything essential is already here. There is a softness now to everything, to the space around you, to the thoughts that may still arise and fade, to the gentle rhythm of breath moving through the body. This softness is not fragile. It is resilient in a quiet way, like stone shaped slowly by wind rather than force. The desert understands this kind of strength. Beneath the sand, the city rests in perfect neutrality. It does not lean toward the past, nor does it reach for the future. It exists fully in what is, a condition that requires no effort to maintain. Long ago, the people believed that when something was complete, it naturally became quiet. Loudness, they thought, was often a sign of imbalance, a way of compensating for something unsettled beneath the surface. True harmony did not announce itself. it simply remained. This belief guided how they spoke, how they moved, how they lived together. Voices were rarely raised, gestures were minimal. Even joy was expressed gently, through shared presence rather than celebration. They trusted that what mattered would be felt without being emphasized. The city itself was an extension of this trust. As you remain here, listening without needing to follow, you may notice that the sense of time has softened further. Minutes no longer feel distinct. The mind no longer tracks progress. This is not loss of awareness, but a deeper form of it, one that does not require measurement. The desert holds this awareness effortlessly. At some point, long after the city was buried, the sand above it reached a state of equilibrium, no longer shifting dramatically, no longer exposing or concealing, just resting. This balance is maintained through countless small adjustments: grains settling, pressure redistributing, temperature equalizing. Balance is never static, it is quietly active. The city participates in this balance without resistance. Its structures accept pressure, distribute weight, and remain intact. There is no struggle, only cooperation with what is. This cooperation extends to everything here: stone, sand, air, silence. And now, to you. There is nothing you need to hold in place, nothing you need to manage. The body knows how to rest. The mind knows how to let go when given permission. If a thought appears, let it pass like wind across the surface. It does not need to be followed. It does not need to be resolved. The city never resolved itself. It simply settled. Above, the sky remains vast and unchanged. Stars continue their slow movement, indifferent to human concerns. They do not hurry. They do not pause. They follow paths older than memory. The people of the city found comfort in this constancy. It reminded them that life did not depend on constant action. Much of existence unfolded on its own, without intervention. That understanding lives on here, in this quiet moment. As the narration fades into gentler space, it becomes less about words and more about presence. The story has already given you everything it needs to give. What remains is rest. The desert remains. The city remains. The wind continues, softly, endlessly. And you can remain too, suspended in calm, supported by stillness, free to drift wherever rest takes you next. Nothing more will be asked of you. Nothing more needs to be said. Everything is at peace now. The quiet carries on without interruption. Nothing signals a new beginning, and nothing announces an ending. The desert has always preferred this way, a continuous unfolding where moments blend gently into one another. The city beneath the sand follows the same rhythm, unmarked by milestones, unbothered by duration. If there is movement now, it is internal, a slow settling, a soft release. The people who once lived here believed that rest was not something earned after effort, but something woven naturally into existence. They rested not because they were tired, but because rest maintained balance. Too much motion, they felt, pulled the world out of alignment. So they paused often. They paused before speaking. They paused before acting. They paused even before resting, allowing the body to arrive fully where it was. This practice shaped their awareness. They noticed subtleties others might overlook. The way temperature shifted just before dawn, the faint difference between one silence and another, the emotional tone of a space before words were exchanged. That sensitivity still lingers. You may sense it now as a gentle awareness without focus, a feeling of being present without needing to attend to anything specific. This is not distraction, it is attunement. Above the city, the desert continues its slow work. Sand grains settle into new positions, each movement insignificant on its own, yet together, forming landscapes that stretch beyond the horizon. This quiet collaboration between countless small actions mirrors how the city itself was built. No single stone mattered more than another. No structure dominated the rest. Everything belonged. In one of the buried dwellings, a low bench remains intact, carved directly from stone. It was never moved, never owned. People sat there when they needed stillness, when conversation felt unnecessary, when the world felt slightly out of balance. Sitting there did not fix anything. It simply allowed things to return to themselves. That bench remains, untouched, unseen, yet complete. The idea that something can retain its purpose without being used is difficult to accept in modern life. But the city understood this instinctively. Purpose was not consumed through action. It was inherent. The listening place, the curved streets, the shaded courtyards. They do not miss footsteps. They do not wait. They exist fully, regardless of attention. And so do you. As you rest with this narration, you are not required to engage. You are allowed to drift. The words are no longer leading you anywhere. They are simply present, like the desert itself, expansive, neutral, calm. Breath continues. The body settles. The mind loosens its grip. There is a point where listening becomes unnecessary, where the story fades into sensation. That point may come gradually or suddenly. Either way, it is welcome. The city has always trusted natural transitions. When night eventually gives way to morning, it does so without announcement. Light arrives quietly, touching stone and sand with equal gentleness. Shadows shorten. Temperature shifts. Life resumes without ceremony. But beneath it all, the city remains unchanged. Not hidden, not lost, simply resting. And in this rest, there is no urgency to move on. You can remain here as long as you like, in this quiet, spacious moment where nothing demands your attention and nothing is incomplete. The desert holds. The city rests. The wind continues its endless, patient motion. Everything else can wait. The calm persists, steady and unbroken. There is a feeling now of being held within something vast, something that does not require effort to maintain. The desert has always offered this kind of support, not by cushioning, but by allowing space. Space to breathe, space to exist without friction. Beneath the sand, the city rests within that same allowance. It no longer distinguishes between past and present. The idea of before and after has softened into something less defined. What remains is a continuous state of being, neither active nor dormant, but balanced. In this balance, even memory loses its sharpness. Events are not replayed. Stories are not repeated. Everything that needed to happen has already happened, and everything that remains is simply presence. The people who lived here once understood this deeply. They believed that when something had fulfilled its purpose, it did not need to be revisited. Revisiting was often a sign of attachment, and attachment was seen as a form of weight. Lightness, they believed, allowed life to move freely. So they traveled lightly. They spoke lightly. They remembered lightly. And when it was time to leave, they left lightly too. This lightness did not mean absence of care. It meant care without possession, a respect that did not cling, a love that did not demand permanence. The city absorbed this philosophy into its very shape. Even now, buried and unseen, it does not feel heavy. It does not press upward against the sand. It settles into the land naturally, distributing its presence evenly without strain. As you continue listening, you may notice that awareness feels wider than the story itself. The words are no longer central. They drift at the edges of perception, like distant wind. This is not loss of attention. It is a shift into rest. There is nothing you need to imagine now, nothing you need to follow. The desert scene remains available if you wish it, but it does not insist. You can let it dissolve into simple sensation, a sense of openness, of calm, of quiet continuity. Above, the sky slowly lightens, though not yet enough to signal morning. It is the softest transition, the difference between deep night and less deep night. The world holds its breath in this in-between state. The city does not respond. It does not prepare. It does not awaken. It remains as it always has, steady, complete, undisturbed. This steadiness can become your own. Let the body settle fully into its resting place. Let gravity do the work of holding you. Let breath move without guidance. If thoughts arise, let them pass without engagement. They do not need resolution. They do not need meaning. The city never searched for meaning. It lived alignment instead, and in alignment, rest comes naturally. The desert stretches endlessly. The wind continues its quiet work. The city remains at peace. You can remain here too for as long as you need, carried by stillness, supported by silence, with nothing required of you at all. The stillness does not fade. It settles more deeply, like a gentle weight that is comforting rather than heavy. The kind of weight that reassures you something solid is beneath you, something reliable that does not shift when you release into it. The desert has always been that kind of presence. It does not rush to fill silence. It allows silence to expand, to stretch, until it becomes spacious enough to rest within. The city learned this quality from the land itself, shaping its existence around allowance rather than insistence. Beneath the sand, nothing stirs unnecessarily. Stone remains cool and steady. The air held within narrow passages stays calm, unmoving. Even the faint echoes that once formed there have softened into complete quiet. Not absence, but completion. Long ago, the people of the city believed that every place had a natural rhythm. To live well, one had to discover that rhythm and move with it. Moving against it caused strain. Moving too quickly caused imbalance. Moving too slowly caused stagnation. So they observed. They observed the desert's patience. They observed the sky's consistency. They observed how everything arrived and departed without apology. In time, observation became instinct. That instinct still lingers here, subtly shaping the atmosphere. It invites you to release effort, to stop managing the moment, to allow rest to happen on its own. Nothing here requires interpretation. Nothing demands response. Even the concept of continuing feels different now, less like progression and more like remaining. The story no longer unfolds forward. It settles inward. Above the city, the surface of the desert cools completely. The sand holds the night's temperature evenly, neither giving nor taking more than necessary. This equilibrium is rare, brief, and deeply peaceful. It is during these hours that the land feels most neutral, free from extremes, free from tension. The city rests within this neutrality effortlessly. You may sense that your body is doing the same. Muscles soften without instruction. Breath finds its own pace. Awareness widens, then gently loosens. There is no reason to stay alert, no reason to let go. Both states are welcome. The desert does not distinguish between them. If images arise, the curve of a wall, the openness of a courtyard, the endless sky, allow them to come and go. They are not messages. They are impressions, passing through like weather. The city never clung to impressions. It allowed them to pass. This is why it feels complete even now. Somewhere deep beneath the sand, a stone remains exactly where it was placed centuries ago. It does not remember being placed. It does not anticipate being moved. It exists fully in its position, supported by everything around it. This quiet cooperation is what gives the city its enduring calm. And now you are part of that same cooperation, supported, held, with nothing asked of you. The desert stretches on. The city rests. The wind moves gently, endlessly. And you can continue resting here, unhurried, untouched by urgency, knowing that nothing important is being left behind. Everything essential remains exactly where it belongs. The calm remains steady, as though it has settled into its final, most comfortable form. There is no longer a sense of direction, no forward, no backward, only presence. The desert holds this presence easily, without effort or intention. It does not try to create meaning. It allows meaning to dissolve. Beneath the sand, the city exists in this same state of quiet completion. Nothing there is waiting, nothing there is unfinished. The spaces that once held movement now hold stillness just as naturally. Corridors that guided footsteps now guide nothing at all, and in doing so, they fulfill their purpose just as fully as they once did. The people of the city believed that usefulness did not end when action ceased. A thing that had served well carried that service within it, even in rest. This belief softened their relationship with loss. Nothing was truly lost if it had been lived completely. So they did not mourn endings. They acknowledged transitions. That understanding echoes gently here. As you remain with this narration, the boundary between listening and resting grows thinner. Words arrive softly and leave just as softly. They do not need to be remembered. They do not need to be followed. The desert never asked for attention. The city never demanded remembrance. They exist comfortably without either. Above, the sky continues its slow, imperceptible shift. Darkness lightens by degrees too subtle to notice moment by moment. Change happens whether it is observed or not. This is the nature of continuity. The city rests within it. The desert moves within it. And you are held within it as well. If your thoughts begin to drift into fragments, half-formed images, gentle sensations, quiet pauses, allow them to do so. This is not losing focus, it is entering rest. The people who lived here once trusted this state. They knew that clarity often arrived not through concentration, but through release. When effort softened, understanding emerged on its own. That understanding did not take words. It took space. The same space surrounds you now. There is no lesson hidden here, no secret waiting to be uncovered. Only the reassurance that stillness is enough. The city remains beneath the sand, unchanged, untroubled, complete. The desert stretches endlessly, patient and calm. The wind continues its quiet passage, smoothing, settling, reshaping without urgency. And you may continue resting here, supported by silence, carried by calm, for as long as you wish. Nothing else is required. Nothing else will happen. Everything is at rest. The quiet endures, gentle and unbroken. There is a sense now that even the idea of listening has softened. The words are no longer something you follow, but something that drifts past, like air moving through an open space. They do not interrupt rest. They move alongside it. The desert has always known how to do this. It does not impose itself. It allows itself to be present, vast, open, unhurried. The city learned this quality so well that even in disappearance, it does not feel absent. Beneath the sand, the city remains whole. Stones rest against one another in quiet cooperation. Weight is shared evenly. Pressure disperses gently into the ground. Nothing strains, nothing resists. The land and the city have reached an agreement that requires no maintenance. This agreement is still honored. Long ago, when the last people departed, they did not seal doors or mark their leaving. They simply stepped away, trusting the place to take care of itself. And it did. Slowly, patiently, exactly as it was meant to. Now, centuries later, that same patience surrounds you. There is no reason to anticipate what comes next, no reason to remain alert. The story has become atmosphere, a steady presence rather than a sequence of events. You may notice that your breathing has found a rhythm all its own, not controlled, not guided, just happening. The body knows how to rest when it is allowed to. The people of the city trusted this instinct. They did not try to improve upon it. They allowed the body, the land, and the moment to align naturally. This alignment feels quiet. It feels spacious. It feels complete. Above the city, the desert remains unchanged in appearance. yet constantly adjusting in subtle ways. Grains of sand settle into new positions. Temperatures equalize. Balance renews itself continuously without effort. This is how rest works. It is not static. It is gently active. As you remain here, there is nothing left to imagine. The city no longer needs to be visualized. It has done its work simply by existing in the background of awareness. The desert no longer needs description. The wind no longer needs movement. Everything essential has already been said, not in words, but in the feeling that remains. You are free to drift, free to let go, free to rest without expectation. The city remains beneath the sand, calm and unchanging. The desert stretches endlessly, open and neutral. The wind continues its quiet passage, smoothing and settling the world. And you can remain here too, held in stillness, supported by silence, with nothing asked of you at all. Everything rests. Everything continues. Nothing needs to happen next. The calm holds, steady and unbroken, as if the world itself has chosen to rest alongside you. There is no sense now of moving through a story. The story has softened into an environment, something you are within rather than something you observe. The desert has always preferred this way of existing. It does not perform, it does not persuade, it simply allows. Beneath the sand, the city rests in that same allowance. Its presence is no longer tied to form or memory. It does not need to be imagined clearly. Even without shape, even without detail, it remains whole. The idea of the city has become quieter than thought, more like a feeling that settles gently in the background. This is how the people once lived, not by holding tightly to definitions, but by trusting what could be felt without explanation. They believed that when something was truly understood, it no longer needed to be named. So much of their world existed without labels. They did not divide life into strict categories of sacred and ordinary. Everything was approached with the same quiet respect, gathering water, sitting in silence, watching the sky change. All were equal expressions of being present. The city reflected this equality. No building was elevated above the rest. No space was considered more important than another. Even the place of listening did not claim authority. It was simply open, available to anyone, at any time, without instruction. That openness still exists, though it can no longer be entered. And yet, in a way, it can. You enter it now, not with your body, but with your willingness to remain still, to let the moment be enough, to allow awareness to rest without direction. The desert welcomes this kind of entry. Above the city, the night air remains cool and even. There is no sudden wind, no disturbance. The land seems to hold its breath, not in anticipation, but in comfort. This pause does not feel temporary. It feels complete. Time has lost its edges here. Minutes no longer stack into hours. They dissolve into one another, indistinguishable, unmeasured. The body responds naturally, loosening where it had held tension without realizing it. The mind follows, releasing the need to track or evaluate. Nothing is being missed. The city never feared being forgotten because it never relied on memory for its existence. It relied on alignment, with land, with rhythm, with acceptance. Alignment does not disappear when attention moves elsewhere. It continues quietly, undisturbed. That quiet continuation surrounds you now. If there is any remaining effort, any subtle holding, it can soften. There is no need to stay awake. There is no need to fall asleep. Both states are welcome and neither is required. The desert does not distinguish between them. Somewhere far away, the world continues its movement. People wake, lights turn on, roads fill. None of that reaches here. This place exists apart from urgency, apart from demand. The city rests, the land holds. The wind moves softly, without insistence. And you remain, supported, unhurried, free to drift, wherever rest carries you next. Nothing more will be added. Nothing more needs to unfold. Everything essential is already present, quietly, completely, at peace. The quiet continues, deep and unbroken, as though it has settled into its most natural state. There is no effort in it now, no shaping, no guiding. The calm exists on its own, steady and sufficient. The desert has always known how to remain like this, present without pressure, expansive without demand. Beneath the sand, the city rests in perfect agreement with that calm. It does not respond to time passing above it. Days and nights move on, seasons shift, distant storms rise and fall far beyond the horizon, yet nothing here is disturbed. The city has released any need to participate in change. It allows change to happen around it instead. This allowance was once a way of life. The people who lived here understood that control was never as effective as cooperation. They did not attempt to master the land. They learned how to move with it, how to listen for when action was appropriate and when stillness was wiser. Often stillness was wiser. In stillness they found clarity without effort. Decisions made after rest were gentler, more precise. Words spoken after silence carried less weight and more truth. Life unfolded without being pushed. That same unfolding surrounds you now. The narration has slowed almost to the pace of breath itself. Words appear, then fade, leaving space behind them. That space is not empty. It is supportive, like the open desert under a wide sky. You may notice that awareness feels broader than the body, broader than the room you are in. This expansion does not require focus. It happens naturally when nothing is being resisted. The city rests in this expansion endlessly. There is a sense now that the story has nearly said everything it needs to say, not because it is finished, but because completion does not require repetition. Like the city itself, the narration has arrived at a state of quiet sufficiency. Still, the calm remains, unbroken. Above the city, the desert surface holds steady. Sand lies smooth, undisturbed. The wind passes lightly, careful not to impose. Even movement has learned restraint. The people of the city once believed that the highest form of wisdom was knowing when to stop adding, when to leave space unfilled, when to trust that enough had already been done. This belief allowed them to depart without regret. It allows the city to remain without loss. And it allows this moment to exist without expectation. As you rest here, there is nothing left to prepare for, no transition to anticipate. The calm does not end abruptly. It simply continues, carrying you gently toward deeper rest. The desert remains vast and quiet. The city remains whole and undisturbed. The wind continues its soft, endless motion. We are now moving very close to the final resting point of the narration, where everything settles fully and nothing more is needed. For now, you can simply remain here, letting stillness do what it does best. Hold, support, rest. The stillness settles completely now, as if it has found its natural resting place. Nothing shifts suddenly. Nothing concludes with emphasis. The calm simply deepens, becoming quieter than thought, gentler than intention. The desert has always understood how to arrive at this point, where movement becomes unnecessary and rest sustains itself. Beneath the sand, the city rests in full harmony with this moment. It no longer exists as a place to imagine or a story to follow. It exists as a presence, subtle, steady, complete. The idea of the city has softened into something almost wordless, like a memory that no longer needs detail to feel real. This is where the people of the city believed all things eventually returned, not to silence alone, but to balance. They believed that when life was lived fully, it naturally settled into quiet. There was no need to hold on to outcomes, no need to preserve meaning. What mattered had already passed through experience and left its imprint gently behind. That imprint remains here now. The desert holds it without effort. The city rests within it without resistance. And you are held in the same way, supported, unburdened, free from urgency. There is no longer a need for imagery, no need to picture sand or stone or sky. Those forms have already done their work. What remains is simply the feeling of space, open, calm, unpressured. Breath moves slowly. The body is heavy in the most comfortable way. Awareness drifts without direction. Nothing is expected of you. The world beyond this moment continues, but it does not intrude. It feels distant, softened, as though wrapped in the same quiet that surrounds you now. There is no need to return to it yet. There is no need to leave this space behind. The desert does not hurry you. The city does not call you back. The wind does not demand attention. Everything allows. As the narration reaches its natural resting point, it does not close like a door. It fades like light at the edge of night, gradually, gently, without interruption. The city remains beneath the sand, unchanged and complete. The desert stretches endlessly, calm and accepting. The wind continues its slow, patient movement. And you may continue resting here, carried by stillness, supported by silence, knowing that nothing more needs to happen. The quiet remains, and then it softens even further. There is no clear moment when the narration becomes something else. It does not stop. It does not announce completion. It simply releases its hold, the way the desert releases heat at night, slowly, naturally, without resistance. The city beneath the sand does the same. It has no awareness of being finished, because it was never incomplete. Its story was not meant to stretch endlessly forward. It was meant to be lived fully and then allowed to settle. That settling is what you are resting within now. Nothing more needs to be described. The wind continues its gentle passage across the surface, shaping and reshaping the dunes in ways too subtle to notice in any single moment. Sand moves, stone remains, balance is maintained without effort. Below, the city stays exactly as it is, not hidden, not revealed, simply present. It does not wait for footsteps. It does not anticipate voices. It rests in quiet confidence, knowing that existence does not require recognition. The desert has always known this truth, and now you do too. There is no need to stay awake. There is no need to fall asleep. Whatever state you are drifting toward is the right one. Breath moves on its own. The body rests where it is. The mind loosens and lets go. The story has already given you everything it needed to give, not through information, but through atmosphere, through spaciousness, through calm. Nothing more will be added. Nothing more needs to happen. The city rests. The desert remains. The wind continues its endless, patient movement. And you are free to remain here, held in stillness, carried by quiet, as long as you wish. Everything has settled now.